In the unforgiving landscape of military precision shooting, where every breath matters and a single millimeter can mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure, there exists a brotherhood, or so it was thought, of elite marksmen who could reach out and touch targets at distances that defy human comprehension. For decades, this realm belonged exclusively to men, warriors who carried the weight of impossible shots on their shoulders and the burden of life and death, decisions in their crosshairs. But sometimes, the most extraordinary stories emerge from the most unexpected places, challenging everything we thought we knew about human potential and the limits of what's possible when determination meets opportunity. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. This is the story of a woman who was told she didn't have what it takes, who faced rejection, skepticism, and outright dismissal from those who should have been her mentors. It's about someone who was considered fundamentally unsuited for the most demanding discipline in military marksmanship, yet who would go on to shatter not just barriers, but records that had stood unchallenged for years. Her journey would redefine what it means to be a sniper, and in doing so, she would prove that greatness doesn't always come in the package we expect. Sarah Chun had always been drawn to precision. Growing up in rural Montana, she spent countless hours helping her grandfather on his ranch, learning to repair intricate machinery and developing an almost supernatural attention to detail. While other kids were playing video games or scrolling through social media, Sarah found herself fascinated by the mechanics of things, how a slight adjustment to a carburetor could transform an engine's performance, or how the precise alignment of a fence post could mean the difference between a structure that lasted decades and one that failed in the first strong wind. Her grandfather, a Korean War veteran named Frank Chen, had married her grandmother after the war and settled in the Korean War veteran named Frank Chen. Vast expanses of big sky country. He rarely spoke about his military service, but Sarah noticed things, the way he could estimate distances with uncanny accuracy, how he seemed to read weather patterns like a book, and most intriguingly, how he could consistently hit targets with his old hunting rifle at ranges that left other local hunters shaking their heads in disbelief. It was during her junior year of high school that Sarah first experienced the shooting sports. The school had started a precision rifle club, and despite having no formal training, she demonstrated an almost preternatural ability to place bullets exactly where she intended them to go. Her coach, a retired Marine named Tom Harrison, was initially skeptical. Sarah was slight of build, barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighed maybe 115 pounds soaking wet. In his experience, successful long-range shooters tended to be larger, stronger individuals who could handle the physical demands of the discipline. But Sarah's natural ability was undeniable. Within weeks, she was outperforming students who had been shooting competitively for years. Her breathing control was textbook perfect, her trigger discipline was flawless, and perhaps most importantly, she demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to read environmental conditions, wind speed, temperature gradients, humidity levels, all the invisible factors that can send a bullet off course at extreme distances. Tom Harrison had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and had worked alongside some of the military's finest marksmen. He recognized raw talent when he saw it, and Sarah Chun possessed something that couldn't be taught, an intuitive understanding of ballistics and an almost zen-like ability to remain calm under pressure. When she looked through a scope, everything else seemed to fade away, leaving only her, the rifle, and the target. During her senior year, Sarah's reputation began to spread throughout the competitive shooting community in Montana and beyond. She started entering regional competitions, and despite being one of the youngest and smallest competitors, she consistently placed in the top 3. Her shot groups were impossibly tight, her consistency was remarkable, and she seemed to thrive under the pressure that made other shooters crack. but it was her performance at the National High School Precision Rifle Championship that truly announced her arrival on the national stage. Competing against the best young shooters from across the country, many of whom had been training with professional coaches and expensive equipment for years, Sarah not only won her division but set a new record for accuracy at 1,000 yards. The margin of victory was so decisive that it left seasoned competitors and coaches questioning what they thought they knew about the sport. The win caught the attention of several college shooting programs, and Sarah found herself with scholarship offers from universities with strong ROTC programs. But more significantly, it brought her to the attention of military recruiters who saw in her the raw material for something special. The Army's sniper program had been exclusively male since its inception, but times were changing and forward-thinking. Leaders were beginning to recognize that the most important attributes of a successful sniper, patience, precision, emotional control, and the ability to remain motionless for hours at a time, weren't necessarily correlated with physical size or gender. However, not everyone in the military establishment was ready for this change. When Sarah expressed interest in pursuing sniper training after enlisting, she encountered resistance that ranged from subtle discouragement to outright hostility. The conventional wisdom held that women simply weren't built for the physical and psychological demands of sniper work. The equipment was too heavy, the training too brutal, and the psychological stress of taking human lives at extreme distances too overwhelming for the supposedly more emotional female psyche. The skepticism Sarah faced wasn't just from gruff drill sergeants or old-school officers clinging to outdated notions of warfare. Even some of the most progressive minds in the military questioned whether a woman could handle the unique pressures of sniper work. Unlike other combat roles that had been gradually opening to women, the sniper position required not just physical capability and mental toughness, but a specific psychological profile that military psychologists believed was predominantly found in males. Dr. Michael Reeves, a military psychologist who had developed screening protocols for special operations units, had spent years studying the mental characteristics that predicted success in high-stress combat roles. His research suggested that effective snipers needed what he termed emotional compartmentalization, the ability to separate the act of killing from personal feelings of guilt or remorse. His studies indicated that men were statistically better at this type of psychological separation, leading to the assumption that women would struggle with the moral and emotional weight of the sniper's role. But Sarah Chun didn't fit neatly into any of the established psychological profiles. When she underwent the initial screening process, her test results were unlike anything the evaluators had seen. She scored in the 99th percentile for emotional stability under stress, demonstrated exceptional patience and focus during extended observation exercises, and most surprisingly, showed no signs of the anxiety or hesitation that psychologists expected when discussing the lethal aspects of the role. Captain James Rodriguez, who was tasked with evaluating Sarah's application for sniper school, found himself in an unprecedented situation. On paper, she was an ideal candidate. Her shooting scores were exceptional, her physical fitness adequate despite her small stature, and her psychological profile suggested she had the mental tools necessary for success. But she was also challenging. Decades of institutional wisdom about who could be an effective sniper. The debate about Sarah's candidacy reached the highest levels of the Army's leadership. Some argued that allowing her into the program would be a dangerous social experiment that could compromise operational effectiveness. Others contended that excluding her based on gender alone would be a waste of exceptional talent and potentially discriminatory. The compromise that emerged was perhaps the most challenging path of all. Sarah would be allowed to attempt the training, but she would be held to exactly the same standards as her male counterparts, with no accommodations made for her size or gender. Sniper school was notorious for its attrition rate. Of the carefully selected candidates who began the program, Typically fewer than half would complete it successfully. The training was designed to push students beyond their perceived limits, testing not just their marksmanship skills, but their ability to operate effectively under extreme physical and psychological stress. From the moment Sarah arrived at the training facility, she was under intense scrutiny. Her instructors, all veteran snipers with combat experience, were skeptical but professional. They had been ordered to evaluate her fairly, but they also had serious doubts about whether someone of her physical stature could handle the demands of the training. The sniper rifle system weighed nearly 30 pounds, and students were expected to carry it along with additional equipment for miles across rough terrain, often while maintaining complete silence and remaining invisible to observers. The first few weeks of training focused on fundamental skills, camouflage and concealment, stalking techniques, observation and reporting procedures, and of course, marksmanship. Sarah excelled in most areas, but her small size did present challenges. During stalking exercises, where students had to move undetected across open ground while carrying full equipment loads, she sometimes fell behind her larger classmates who could cover ground more quickly. However, Sarah's instructors began to notice something interesting. While she might be slower in some physical aspects of the training, she demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to remain undetected. Her natural understanding of camouflage and concealment was exceptional, and she seemed to have an intuitive grasp of how to use terrain and vegetation to her advantage. During one memorable exercise, she managed to get within 50 yards of an observation post without being detected, a feat that impressed even the most skeptical instructors. But it was on the shooting range that Sarah truly began to distinguish herself. The precision required for long-range shooting was unlike anything most students had experienced, even those with extensive hunting or competitive shooting backgrounds. Wind conditions, temperature variations, humidity levels, and even the rotation of the Earth all had to be factored into calculations for shots at extreme distances. Many students struggled to master the complex mathematics and environmental reading skills required for consistent accuracy. Sarah approached these challenges with the same methodical precision she had applied to everything else in her life. She spent extra hours studying ballistics tables, practiced reading wind conditions until she could estimate wind speed and direction to within a few miles per hour, and developed an almost obsessive attention to detail when it came to equipment maintenance and preparation. Her shooting scores consistently placed her at or near the top of her class, but more importantly, she demonstrated the kind of consistency that instructors knew was crucial for operational success. While some students might occasionally produce spectacular shots, Sarah delivered predictable accuracy day after day, regardless of weather conditions or stress levels. As the training progressed and the attrition rate began to take its toll on the class, Sarah found herself part of an increasingly select group of survivors. The physical demands of the program were brutal long hours in uncomfortable positions, sleep deprivation, and constant pressure to perform. But she adapted to each challenge with determination and ingenuity. One of her most significant advantages became apparent during the psychological aspects of the training. While her male classmates sometimes struggled with the emotional weight of their potential role, Sarah demonstrated remarkable emotional equilibrium. She approached the lethal aspects of sniper work with a clinical detachment that impressed her instructors while still maintaining the moral awareness necessary to operate within legal and ethical boundaries. The transformation of Sarah Chun from a small-town Montana ranch girl to a potential military sniper wasn't just about mastering technical skills or proving she could keep up with her male counterparts. It was about overcoming institutional inertia and changing minds that had been made up for decades about what a sniper should look like, sound like, and most importantly, think like. As the training program reached its midpoint, the initial class of 24 candidates had been reduced to just 14. The attrition wasn't necessarily due to poor marksmanship, most of the candidates who had made it this far were exceptional shooters. Instead, students were eliminated for a variety of reasons. Some couldn't handle the physical demands of carrying heavy equipment across rough terrain for hours at a time. Others cracked under the psychological pressure of simulated combat scenarios. And a few simply couldn't master the complex calculations and environmental reading skills required for consistent long-range accuracy. Sarah had survived every cut, but she was acutely aware that her presence in the program was still viewed as experimental by many in the chain of command. Every mistake she made was scrutinized more closely than those of her classmates, and every success was analyzed for signs that the standards had been lowered to accommodate her. The pressure was immense, but it was also familiar. She had been proving herself against skepticism her entire life. The training environment at the sniper school was designed to replicate the stress and uncertainty of combat operations. Students were sleep-deprived, undernourished, and constantly challenged with scenarios that had no clear right answers. They were expected to make life-and-death decisions with incomplete information, while maintaining the precision necessary to place bullets within inches of their intended targets at distances exceeding half a mile. One of the most challenging aspects of the training was what instructors called target discrimination, learning to distinguish between legitimate military targets and civilians in complex scenarios. This training used sophisticated simulators and role-playing exercises that pushed students to their psychological limits. The ability to make these distinctions quickly and accurately under stress was considered one of the most critical skills a sniper could possess. Sarah excelled in these exercises, demonstrating a level of judgment and decision-making that impressed even her most skeptical instructors. She seemed to possess an intuitive understanding of human behavior that allowed her to read situations quickly and accurately. Where some of her classmates might hesitate or second-guess themselves, Sarah displayed a calm confidence that allowed her to make complex decisions quickly and stick with them. Staff Sergeant Mike Torres, one of the lead instructors at the school, had initially been among the most skeptical about Sarah's presence in the program. A veteran of 3 combat deployments with dozens of confirmed kills, he believed that sniper work was fundamentally a man's job. But as he watched Sarah's performance day after day, his skepticism gradually gave way to respect. "She doesn't shoot like a woman or think like a woman," he later recalled. "She shoots like a sniper and thinks like a sniper. That's all that matters." The comment, while perhaps not as enlightened as it could have been, represented a significant shift in thinking among the instructional staff. They were beginning to evaluate Sarah based purely on her performance, rather than their preconceptions about gender roles in combat. As the program entered its final phase, the remaining candidates faced their ultimate test, a comprehensive field exercise that would simulate actual combat conditions. Students were required to operate independently for several days, conducting reconnaissance missions, making stalking approaches, and engaging targets at various ranges while avoiding detection by opposing forces. The exercise was designed to be a culmination of everything the students had learned, testing not just their technical skills but their ability to think strategically, adapt to changing conditions, and maintain performance under extreme stress. It was during this final test that Sarah would face her greatest challenge yet, and achieve something that would forever change how the military viewed female snipers. The scenario placed Sarah in a simulated enemy territory where she was tasked with conducting surveillance on a high-value target and, if the opportunity presented itself, eliminating him. The target would be located in a compound approximately 1,200 yards from her assigned hide site, a distance that pushed the boundaries of what was considered reliably achievable with the rifle system she was using. Sarah spent nearly 18 hours in position, moving only when absolutely necessary and maintaining constant observation of the target area. The weather was challenging: variable winds, changing light conditions, and occasional rain showers that affected visibility and ballistics calculations. These were exactly the kinds of conditions that separated truly exceptional snipers from merely competent ones. When the target finally appeared, Sarah had only moments to make her shot. The distance was at the extreme edge of her rifle's effective range. The wind conditions were constantly shifting, and she had been in position for so long that muscle fatigue was beginning to affect her stability. Everything she had learned over the previous months came together in a single moment of perfect focus. The shot was textbook perfect, a clean hit that demonstrated not just exceptional marksmanship but the kind of tactical patience and decision-making that defined elite snipers. But more than that, it was a statement that talent and dedication could overcome institutional prejudice and preconceived notions about human limitations. When Sarah completed the training program and received her sniper qualification, she became the first woman to earn the designation in the U.S. Army. But her instructors knew that this was just the beginning of a story that would ultimately challenge everything the military thought it knew about the capabilities of female soldiers in combat roles. Sarah's graduation from sniper school created ripples throughout the military establishment that extended far beyond the small community of precision marksmen. News of the first female Army sniper spread quickly through military circles, generating reactions that ranged from cautious optimism to outright hostility. Some viewed her achievement as a historic breakthrough that would open new opportunities for women in combat roles, while others saw it as a dangerous precedent that would compromise operational effectiveness for the sake of political correctness. The debate wasn't merely academic. Sarah's success meant that she would eventually be deployed to combat zones, where her performance wouldn't just be evaluated by instructors using training scenarios. It would be measured by her ability to protect her fellow soldiers and accomplish real-world missions where failure could mean death. Colonel Patricia Hawkins, one of the highest-ranking women in Army Special Operations, understood the significance of Sarah's achievement better than most. She had spent her career fighting for opportunities to prove that women could excel in roles traditionally reserved for men, and she knew that Sarah's performance in combat would be scrutinized as a test case for all women who might follow in her footsteps. "The burden she's carrying isn't fair," Colonel Hawkins later reflected. "She's not just representing herself, she's representing every woman who wants to serve in combat arms. One mistake, one moment of weakness, and it could set us back decades." Sarah was assigned to the 1st Infantry Division Scout Sniper Platoon, where she would serve alongside some of the Army's most experienced marksmen. Her new unit was scheduled for deployment to Afghanistan within 6 months, giving her time to integrate with her team and continue honing her skills in preparation for combat operations. The integration process wasn't without challenges. Some of her new teammates were supportive and professional, treating her as they would any new team member. Others remained skeptical, questioning whether she would be able to perform under the stress of actual combat. The weight of their doubts was palpable, but Sarah had learned to channel external pressure into motivation for improvement. Sergeant First Class David Kim, the platoon's senior non-commissioned officer, took a pragmatic approach to Sarah's integration. A veteran of multiple deployments with an impressive record of successful missions, he was less concerned with the politics of having a female sniper than with ensuring his team remained operationally effective. "I don't care if you're male, female, purple, or green," he told the platoon during Sarah's first team meeting. "What matters is whether you can do your job when lives are on the line. Chun has earned her place here through performance, and she be evaluated the same way as everyone else." This professional approach helped establish Sarah's credibility within the unit, but she knew that ultimate acceptance would only come through proven performance in combat. Training scenarios and qualification courses were one thing. Actual combat operations were something entirely different. During the months leading up to deployment, Sarah threw herself into preparation with characteristic intensity. She spent countless hours on the range, refining her skills at increasingly extreme distances, and under various environmental conditions. She studied intelligence reports from Afghanistan, familiarizing herself with the terrain, weather patterns, and tactical situations she was likely to encounter. But perhaps most importantly, she worked to build trust and camaraderie with her teammates. She understood that sniper operations were inherently team efforts, requiring seamless coordination between the shooter and spotter, perfect communication, and absolute mutual trust. Her partner would need to have complete confidence in her abilities, just as she would need to trust him to protect her during vulnerable moments when she was focused through her scope. Staff. Sergeant Marcus Williams was assigned as Sarah's spotter and partner. A 8-year veteran with 3 previous deployments, he had initially been skeptical about working with a female sniper. His concerns weren't rooted in prejudice as much as in practical considerations. He had seen combat stress affect soldiers in unpredictable ways, and he worried about how the added pressure of being the first woman in her role might affect Sarah's performance when lives depended on it. However, as they trained together, Williams began to appreciate Sarah's exceptional skills and professional attitude. Her preparation was meticulous, her decision-making was sound, and her shooting was consistently excellent. More importantly, she demonstrated the kind of calm composure that he had learned to value in high-stress situations. "She's got ice water in her veins," Williams observed after a particularly challenging training exercise. "I've worked with shooters who were technically proficient, but fell apart when things got complicated. Shun just gets more focused when the pressure increases." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As Sarah's deployment date approached, word of her impending assignment began to attract attention from media outlets and military analysts interested in this historic first. The Army's Public Affairs Office was careful to balance the significance of the milestone with operational security concerns, but Sarah's story became a symbol of the military's evolving approach to gender integration in combat roles. The attention was both welcome and burdensome. Sarah appreciated the opportunity to inspire other women who might be interested in pursuing similar paths, but she was also acutely aware that the spotlight would make every aspect of her performance subject to intense scrutiny. Success would be attributed to the wisdom of progressive military policies, while any failures would be used as evidence that women weren't suited for combat roles. During her final weeks of training, Sarah achieved something that surprised even her most ardent supporters. During a long-range accuracy exercise, she consistently placed shots within a 2-inch group at 1,400 yards, a distance that pushed the boundaries of what was considered achievable with standard military rifle systems. The performance was particularly impressive because it was accomplished under challenging wind conditions that had caused other experienced snipers in the unit to struggle with accuracy. Master Sergeant Robert Chun, no relation despite the shared surname, the unit's senior sniper and primary instructor, had served in special operations for over 15 years and had trained dozens of snipers. He recognized that Sarah's performance represented something special, not just exceptional marksmanship, but the kind of consistency and reliability that define truly elite shooters. Distance shooting isn't just about making one perfect shot, he explained to a group of visiting officers who had come to observe Sarah's training. It's about making that shot repeatedly, under pressure, when everything depends on it. Chun doesn't just hit the target, she hits it exactly where she aims. Every time. The flight to Afghanistan represented more than just Sarah's first combat deployment. It was the culmination of years of preparation and the beginning of what would either validate or invalidate the military's decision to open sniper roles to women. As her transport aircraft descended through the thin mountain air toward Bagram Airfield, Sarah felt the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders like body armor. The landscape below was harsh and unforgiving, a maze of mountains, valleys, and ancient trade routes that had challenged invaders for centuries. This would be her battlefield, a place where the precision she had developed on stateside ranges would be tested against an enemy that had been perfecting asymmetric warfare tactics for generations. Sarah's unit was assigned to forward operating Base Chapman, a remote outpost in the volatile Khost province near the Pakistani border. The base was frequently targeted by insurgent attacks, and the surrounding terrain provided countless hiding spots for enemy fighters who had learned to use the mountainous landscape to their advantage. The reality of combat operations quickly dispelled any romantic notions about warfare that training might have left intact. Life at FOB Chapman was characterized by constant vigilance, uncomfortable living conditions, and the ever-present awareness that death could arrive without warning from any direction. The enemy in this part of Afghanistan was sophisticated, well-equipped, and intimately familiar with terrain that was completely foreign to most American soldiers. Captain Jennifer Walsh, the base commander, briefed Sarah's unit on the tactical situation shortly after their arrival. Intelligence reports indicated increased enemy activity in the region, with particular concern about a suspected high-value target who was believed to be coordinating attacks against coalition forces from a complex of buildings in the mountains about 8 miles from the base. "We've been trying to get eyes on this target for months," Captain Walsh explained, pointing to a topographical map that showed the challenging terrain surrounding the suspected enemy position. "Traditional reconnaissance has been ineffective because of the distance and the enemy's security measures. We need someone who can get close enough to provide accurate intelligence and, if the opportunity presents itself, eliminate the threat." This was exactly the kind of mission Sarah had trained for, but the reality was far more complex than any training scenario. The target was located at an elevation of over 9,000 feet, requiring a climbing approach through terrain that would challenge even experienced mountaineers. The thin air at that altitude would affect ballistics calculations, and the extreme range, potentially over 1,500 yards, would push her equipment and skills to their absolute limits. Sarah spent 3 days studying the terrain, analyzing weather patterns, and developing her approach plan. The mission would require her to establish an observation post on a ridge overlooking the target area, where she would remain for up to 72 hours conducting surveillance and waiting for an opportunity to engage if ordered. The approach to the target area was grueling. Sarah and her spotter, Staff Sergeant Williams, carried nearly 60 pounds of equipment each as they climbed through rocky terrain in complete darkness. The thin mountain air made every step a struggle, and they had to move slowly to avoid detection by enemy sentries who were known to patrol the area. After 8 hours of careful movement, they reached their designated observation position just as the sun was beginning to rise over the Hindu Kush Mountains. The view was spectacular and tactically perfect. From their concealed position, they could observe the entire target complex, while remaining invisible to anyone in the buildings below. The intelligence they gathered over the next 2 days was invaluable. Sarah's training in observation and reporting proved as important as her marksmanship skills as she documented enemy movements, identified key personnel, and mapped the layout of the target complex. Her reports provided commanders with the most detailed intelligence they had received about enemy operations in the area. On the morning of the 3rd day, their patience was rewarded. A convoy of vehicles approached the target complex, and among the passengers was an individual who matched the description of the high-value target they had been seeking. Sarah confirmed the identification through her scope while Williams relayed the information back to base command. The authorization to engage came quickly. This was a target that had been linked to multiple attacks against coalition forces, and eliminating him could significantly disrupt enemy operations in the region. But the shot would be at the extreme edge of what was considered possible, over 1,600 yards across, a valley with variable wind conditions and extreme Elevation differences. Sarah began her preparations with methodical precision. She calculated the ballistic solution, accounting for the thin air, temperature variations, and wind conditions. The mathematics were complex, but her training had prepared her for exactly this kind of challenge. Williams provided wind readings and helped confirm her calculations while maintaining security for their position. The target remained visible for only a few minutes before disappearing into one of the buildings. Sarah would have to wait for another opportunity, remaining motionless in her position while staying ready to take the shot at a moment's notice. This kind of patience was one of the most challenging aspects of sniper work, maintaining perfect readiness for hours or even days while waiting for a window of opportunity that might last only seconds. Hours passed with no movement in the target complex. The sun climbed higher, creating heat distortions that would affect bullet trajectory. Sarah continuously updated her calculations, preparing for a shot that might never come. This was the reality of sniper work: long periods of tedious waiting, punctuated by moments of intense action that required split-second decision-making and perfect execution. When the target finally reappeared, emerging from a building and walking toward a vehicle, Sarah had perhaps 10 seconds to make a shot that would either justify years of preparation and training or potentially end her career in spectacular failure. The distance was extreme, the conditions were challenging, and the consequences of missing would extend far beyond military considerations. The moment of truth arrived with startling suddenness. After hours of patient waiting, the high-value target emerged from the building complex and began walking across an open courtyard toward a waiting vehicle. Sarah had perhaps 15 seconds before he would disappear behind cover, and this might be their only opportunity for days. Through her scope, Sarah could see the target clearly, despite the extreme distance. At over 1,600 yards, he appeared smaller than a pencil eraser, but her training had prepared her to engage targets at these ranges. Every factor that could affect the bullet's trajectory had been calculated and recalculated: wind speed, temperature, humidity, altitude, even the slight rotation of the Earth that would affect a bullet during its nearly 3-second flight. Time. Staff Sergeant Williams provided final wind readings and confirmed the range to target. His voice was calm and professional, but Sarah could sense the tension beneath his composed exterior. This wasn't just another training exercise. This was the shot that would either validate everything they had worked toward or potentially compromise the mission and put their entire unit at risk. Sarah controlled her breathing, slowing her heart rate and entering the zone of perfect focus that she had cultivated through thousands of hours of practice. The world narrowed to just her, the rifle, and the target. External distractions faded away, the discomfort of lying motionless for hours, the weight of expectations, even the awareness of the historic nature of the moment. There was only the shot. The crosshairs settled on the target with microscopic precision. Sarah's finger found the trigger's breakpoint, that precise moment where the slightest additional pressure would fire the weapon. She had fired this rifle thousands of times and knew exactly how it would respond. Her breathing stopped, her body became perfectly still, and in that moment of absolute calm, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle's report echoed across the valley, a sharp crack that announced the beginning of a bullet's journey across nearly a mile of empty air. At this distance, Sarah would have to wait almost 3 full seconds to see the result of her shot, an eternity when lives hung in the balance. Through her scope, Sarah watched the target continue walking, seemingly unaware that death was racing toward him at over 2,800 feet per second. The bullet's trajectory was invisible, but Sarah knew from her calculations exactly where it should be at every microsecond of its flight. Wind conditions were holding steady, temperature was constant, and all the variables that could affect accuracy remained within acceptable parameters. Then, with shocking suddenness, the target dropped. Even at extreme distance, Sarah could see that her bullet had found its mark with devastating precision. The high-value target who had orchestrated attacks against coalition forces for months had been eliminated with a single shot that few snipers in military history could have made. Williams confirmed the hit through his spotting scope while immediately beginning to scan for threats. The sound of the rifle shot would have alerted enemy forces to their presence, and they needed to be prepared for potential retaliation. But for a moment, both soldiers allowed themselves to appreciate what had just occurred, not just a successful mission, but a demonstration of marksmanship that redefined what was considered possible. The immediate aftermath was controlled chaos. Radio communications confirmed that the target had been eliminated, and extraction procedures were put into motion. Sarah and Williams needed to leave their observation post quickly before enemy forces could locate and engage them. The success of the mission would mean nothing if they couldn't return safely to base. The extraction went smoothly, with helicopter support providing cover as they moved to a secure landing zone. During the flight back to FOB Chapman, Sarah had time to process what had just occurred. She had not only accomplished her mission successfully, but had done so under conditions that would have challenged any sniper in the military. The shot distance of over 1,600 yards exceeded most previous records for combat engagements, and the precision required had been extraordinary. When word of the successful mission reached higher headquarters, the reaction was immediate and significant. Military leaders who had been skeptical about women in sniper roles were forced to confront evidence that talent and training mattered more than gender when it came to operational effectiveness. Sarah had not just proven herself capable, she had demonstrated performance that exceeded the capabilities of most male snipers. But Sarah's extraordinary achievement was just the beginning of a story that would ultimately culminate in breaking records that had stood for years. The successful elimination of the high-value target was certainly significant, but it was during a subsequent mission that she would accomplish something that would rewrite the books on long-range precision shooting. The intelligence gathered during Sarah's observation mission had revealed the location of a major enemy supply depot hidden deep in the mountains. The depot was heavily guarded and located in a position that made conventional assault nearly impossible. However, satellite imagery showed that a precision shot from an extreme distance might be able to detonate stored ammunition and destroy the entire facility. The mission was approved at the highest levels, but the shot distance would be unprecedented, over 2,100 yards across, a valley with extreme elevation changes and challenging wind conditions. No sniper in military history had successfully engaged a target at this range under combat conditions, and the margin for error was essentially zero. Sarah spent a week preparing for the mission, studying every aspect of the terrain, weather patterns, and ballistic requirements. The mathematics involved were incredibly complex, requiring calculations that pushed the boundaries of what was considered achievable with standard military rifle systems. But her training and natural ability had prepared her for exactly this kind of challenge, and she was determined to prove that the dedication and skill could overcome any obstacle. The mission to destroy the enemy supply depot would require Sarah to push beyond every boundary she had previously encountered. At over 2,100 yards, the target distance exceeded the effective range of her standard rifle system by several hundred yards. The shot would require not just exceptional marksmanship, but a deep understanding of advanced ballistics that few snipers in military history had ever needed to master. The preparation phase was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Working with the unit's armorer, she modified her rifle system to optimize it for extreme long-range accuracy. The standard .308 Winchester ammunition was replaced with specialized, match-grade rounds that had been hand-loaded to precise specifications. The rifle's scope was upgraded with a more powerful magnification system, and even the bipod was replaced with a more stable platform designed for precision shooting at extreme distances. But equipment modifications were only part of the challenge. The ballistic calculations required for a shot at this distance were extraordinarily complex. At 2,100 yards, a bullet would take nearly 4 seconds to reach its target, during which time it would drop over 30 feet from its initial trajectory and drift several feet due to wind effects. The thin mountain air would affect the bullet's flight path, and even minor variations in temperature or humidity could send the projectile off target by several yards. Sarah spent days working with meteorologists and ballistics experts to develop the most accurate possible firing solution. They analyzed historical weather data for the target area, studied wind patterns at different elevations, and used computer modeling to predict atmospheric conditions at the time of the planned mission. Every variable that could affect the bullet's trajectory was identified, measured, and incorporated into the calculations. The psychological preparation was equally important. A shot at this distance would require absolute confidence and perfect execution under extreme pressure. There would be no opportunity for a follow-up shot. The sound of the first round would immediately alert enemy forces to their position, requiring immediate extraction. Sarah would have one chance to accomplish a mission that could significantly impact the war effort in their area of operations. Captain Walsh briefed the mission parameters during a classified planning session. Intelligence had confirmed that the supply depot contained significant quantities of ammunition, explosives, and weapons that were being used to support insurgent operations throughout the region. A successful hit on the ammunition storage area could trigger a chain reaction that would destroy the entire facility, eliminating months of enemy supplies and disrupting their operational capabilities. This isn't just about making a difficult shot, Captain Walsh emphasized. If you can pull this off, it could change the entire tactical situation in this province. But if you can't make the shot, we'll have revealed our intelligence capabilities and put our sources at risk for nothing. The approach to the firing position was even more challenging than the previous mission. Sarah and Williams had to traverse nearly 15 miles of mountainous terrain, much of it above 10,000 feet in elevation, while carrying equipment that had been optimized for accuracy rather than portability. The modified rifle system weighed over 40 pounds, and the additional ammunition and support equipment brought their total load to nearly 80 pounds each. They moved only at night, using night vision equipment to navigate through terrain that would have been treacherous even in daylight. The thin air at high altitude made every step exhausting, and they had to pause frequently to rest and acclimate to the decreasing oxygen levels. The approach took 3 nights of careful movement, with days spent hidden in camouflaged positions. To avoid detection by enemy patrols, when they finally reached their designated firing position, Sarah was confronted with a view that was both breathtaking and intimidating. The target area was visible in the distance, appearing impossibly small even through high-powered optics. The supply depot was nestled in a valley between 2 mountain peaks, with the ammunition storage area barely visible as a small rectangular structure among several buildings. The environmental conditions were challenging but manageable. Wind speeds were variable but generally consistent with the forecast, and visibility was excellent despite the extreme distance. Temperature readings matched the predicted values that had been used in the ballistic calculations, giving Sarah confidence that her firing solution would be accurate. But as she settled into her shooting position and began final preparations, Sarah was confronted with a new challenge that hadn't been anticipated during planning. The extreme altitude was affecting her physically in ways that training at lower elevations hadn't prepared her for. The thin air was making it difficult to maintain steady breathing, and the reduced oxygen levels were causing slight tremors. That could affect accuracy at extreme distances. Williams noticed her struggle and suggested postponing the mission until she could better acclimate to the altitude. But intelligence reports indicated that the supply depot would be moved within the next 48 hours, meaning this might be their only opportunity to strike the target. Sarah made the decision to proceed with the mission despite the physiological challenges. She spent the next several hours allowing her body to adapt to the altitude, while fine-tuning her equipment and confirming her ballistic calculations. The rifle was zeroed and re-zeroed multiple times to ensure perfect accuracy, and every component of the shooting system was checked and double-checked. There would be no room for equipment failure when the moment came to take the shot. As dawn approached, Sarah began her final preparations. The target would be most vulnerable during the early morning hours when enemy activity was at its lowest. Weather conditions were optimal, with stable wind patterns and excellent visibility. Everything that could be controlled had been perfected, and now the mission's success would depend entirely on Sarah's ability to execute a shot that would push the boundaries of what was considered humanly possible. The final hours before the shot were a study in controlled tension. Sarah had positioned herself in a carefully constructed hide that provided both concealment and the stable shooting platform necessary for extreme long-range accuracy. Every detail of her position had been optimized: the angle of her body, the placement of her equipment, even the small sandbags that would support her rifle during the critical moments of the shot. Through her scope, the target appeared impossibly distant. At maximum magnification, the ammunition storage building looked like a small box, barely distinguishable from the surrounding structures. Sarah could see occasional movement around the facility: enemy guards conducting their routine patrols, unaware that they were being observed from over a mile away by someone preparing to destroy their entire supply operation. Williams maintained constant communication with base command, providing updates on weather conditions and target activity. The mission had been approved at the highest levels of military command, with officials monitoring the operation in real time through satellite feeds and radio communications. The pressure was immense, but Sarah had learned to channel external expectations into focused determination. The ballistic calculations had been refined repeatedly, taking into account every measurable variable that could affect the bullet's trajectory. At 2,100 yards, the bullet would drop over 30 feet from its initial path and take nearly 4 seconds to reach the target. During that time, even slight changes in wind conditions could push the projectile several feet off course, and the rotating earth would impart a subtle drift that had to be compensated for in the aiming solution. Sarah's modified rifle system had been tested extensively, but this would be its first real-world application at extreme distance. The hand-loaded ammunition had been crafted specifically for this mission, with each cartridge inspected and measured to ensure consistent performance. The rifle's barrel had been free-floated and bedded to maximize accuracy, and the scope had been mounted and calibrated with precision that bordered on obsession. But perhaps the most critical factor was Sarah's own preparation. She had spent months training her body and mind for this moment, developing the physical conditioning necessary to remain steady at extreme distances, and the mental discipline required to execute perfect shots under enormous pressure. Her breathing techniques had been refined to provide maximum stability, and her trigger control had been practiced until it became completely automatic. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, conditions began to stabilize. Wind patterns became more predictable, temperature variations decreased, and atmospheric density reached optimal levels for long-range shooting. Sarah began her final preparations, checking and rechecking every aspect of her equipment and position. The target area showed signs of increased activity as the morning progressed. Intelligence had indicated that the supply depot would be relocated within hours, meaning that this narrow window of opportunity might be their last chance to strike. Sarah could see vehicles being loaded and personnel moving equipment, confirming that their intelligence about the impending move was accurate. At 0847 hours, Sarah received final authorization to engage the target. The specific aim point had been carefully selected: a section of the ammunition storage building where intelligence suggested the most volatile materials were stored. A precise hit in this location should trigger a chain reaction that would destroy the entire facility and eliminate months of enemy supplies. Sarah settled into her final shooting position, adjusting her body alignment and confirming her scope. Settings one last time. The crosshairs were centered on a target that appeared smaller than a postage stamp at this extreme distance. She began controlling her breathing, slowing her heart rate, and entering the zone of perfect focus that she had cultivated through thousands of hours of training. Williams provided final environmental readings and confirmed the range to target. His voice was steady and professional, but the significance of the moment was evident in the careful precision of his words. This wasn't just another training exercise or routine mission. This was a shot that would either set a new standard for military marksmanship or demonstrate the limits of what was humanly possible. The wind conditions held steady at 4 miles per hour from the northwest, consistent with the forecast that had been used in the ballistic calculations. Temperature was 62 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity was at 45%, and atmospheric pressure was stable. All variables were within the parameters that had been used to develop the firing solution. Sarah's finger found the trigger and settled at the breaking point. Through her scope, she could see the target clearly despite the extreme distance. The ammunition storage building appeared solid and permanent, but she knew that a single bullet placed with sufficient precision could transform it into a massive explosion that would be visible for miles. The moment of perfect stillness arrived. Sarah's breathing stopped, her heart rate slowed to its minimum, and every muscle in her body became completely motionless. The world narrowed to just the crosshairs, the target, and the gentle pressure of her finger against the trigger. External distractions disappeared, the discomfort of her position, the weight of expectations, even the awareness of making history. There was only the shot. The trigger broke with the clean, crisp release that Sarah had felt thousands of times before. The rifle's recoil was absorbed by her body and the shooting platform, and the muzzle blast echoed across the valley like thunder. But now came the longest 4 seconds of Sarah's military career, the time it would take for her bullet to travel over a mile and determine whether months of preparation and training had been sufficient to accomplish the impossible. Through her scope, Sarah watched the target area with intense focus, knowing that any deviation in her calculations or execution would become apparent in the next few moments. This was the shot that would either validate everything she had worked toward or demonstrate that some boundaries simply couldn't be crossed. Regardless of skill or determination, the 4 seconds that followed the trigger pull seemed to stretch into infinity. Sarah maintained her position behind the scope, watching the target area with unwavering focus while her bullet traveled through over a mile of mountain air toward its destination. At this extreme distance, there was no way to track the projectile's flight. She could only wait and watch for the impact that would determine the success or failure of months of preparation. Williams kept his spotting scope trained on the target, ready to call the shot and provide immediate assessment of its accuracy. The silence was absolute except for the sound of their controlled breathing and the distant echo of the rifle shot rolling across the valley. Both soldiers understood that these moments would determine not just the success of their mission, but potentially the future of women in combat roles throughout the military. The bullet, traveling at over 2,800 feet per second when it left the barrel, had slowed considerably during its lengthy flight through the thin mountain air. Gravity had pulled it more than 30 feet below its initial trajectory, while wind effects and the rotation of the earth had pushed it several inches to the side. Every variable that Sarah had calculated and compensated for was now being tested against the harsh reality of extreme, long-range ballistics. At precisely 4 seconds after the shot, a small puff of dust appeared near the ammunition storage building. For a moment, nothing else happened, and Sarah felt a crushing disappointment as she assumed her bullet had impacted harmlessly in the dirt beside the target. But then, with shocking suddenness, the entire building erupted in a massive explosion. that sent flames and debris hundreds of feet into the air. The detonation was far larger than anyone had anticipated. The chain reaction triggered by Sarah's precisely placed bullet had ignited not just the ammunition storage area, but several adjacent buildings containing explosives and fuel. Secondary explosions continued for several minutes, each one adding to the massive pillar of smoke and flame that rose above the valley. Williams confirmed the hit through his spotting scope, his voice tight with amazement. Target destroyed. Multiple secondary explosions. The entire facility is gone. The impact of the successful shot extended far beyond the immediate tactical advantages. Sarah had just accomplished something that no sniper in military history had. Achieved a confirmed combat kill at over 2,100 yards under operational conditions. The shot distance exceeded previous records by several hundred yards and had been accomplished under environmental conditions that would have challenged any marksman, but there was no time for celebration. The massive explosion had certainly alerted every enemy fighter within miles of their presence, and Sarah and Williams needed to evacuate their position immediately. The extraction plan called for helicopter support, but they would need to reach a secure landing zone several miles away. While potentially under pursuit by hostile forces, the movement to the extraction point was harrowing. Enemy forces were clearly responding to the explosion, and Sarah could see armed groups moving through the valleys below their position. The weight of their equipment made rapid movement difficult, but they couldn't abandon specialized gear that contained sensitive components and advanced technology. During their movement, Sarah received radio confirmation that the destruction of the supply depot was even more significant than initially assessed. Satellite imagery showed that the explosion had eliminated not just the immediate target, but several other buildings containing weapons, ammunition, and supplies that intelligence had not previously identified. The economic and logistical impact on enemy operations would be felt for months. The successful extraction was completed without contact with hostile forces, but the significance of what had occurred was already becoming apparent throughout the military chain of command. News of the record-breaking shot spread quickly through special operations communities, generating reactions that ranged from amazement to skepticism about the reported distance and conditions. Colonel Patricia Hawkins, who had followed Sarah's career closely, understood immediately that this achievement would have implications extending far beyond military marksmanship records. Sarah had not just proven that women could succeed in sniper roles, she had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded those of virtually any male sniper in military history. "This changes everything," Colonel Hawkins told a gathering of senior officers during a briefing about the mission's success. "We can no longer discuss women in combat roles as an experiment or accommodation. Chun has just demonstrated performance that establishes a new standard for what's possible in precision warfare." The verification process for the record shot was exhaustive. Military officials confirmed the distance using GPS coordinates and satellite imagery, validated the environmental conditions through meteorological data, and reviewed video footage from multiple sources to ensure the accuracy of all reported details. The shot distance was officially measured at 2,137 yards, over 1.2 miles, making it the longest confirmed sniper kill in military history. But for Sarah, the record was less important than the broader implications of her achievement. She had proven that gender was irrelevant when it came to the skills and attributes that defined elite military performance. Her success opened doors for countless other women who had been excluded from combat roles, based on assumptions about their capabilities, rather than evidence of their performance. The media attention that followed was intense and sometimes overwhelming. Sarah found herself thrust into the spotlight as a symbol of changing military policies and evolving attitudes about women in combat. While she appreciated the opportunity to inspire others, she remained focused on her primary responsibility, serving as an effective member of her unit and continuing to perform the mission successfully. The record-breaking shot had immediate tactical impacts as well. Enemy operations in the region were significantly disrupted by the loss of the supply depot, and intelligence reports indicated that Sarah's demonstrated capabilities had created a psychological effect that extended far beyond the physical destruction. Enemy forces were now aware that they could be engaged accurately at distances they had previously considered safe, forcing them to modify their tactics and limiting their operational freedom. The aftermath of Sarah's record-breaking shot reverberated through military circles around the world. The 2,137-yard kill became a case study taught in sniper schools, analyzed by ballistics experts, and discussed in military journals as a watershed moment in precision warfare. But beyond the technical achievement, Sarah's success fundamentally altered the conversation about women in combat roles and what was possible when talent was allowed to flourish regardless of gender. The verification process had been exhaustive and undeniable. Multiple independent sources confirmed the distance, environmental conditions, and target destruction. High-definition video footage from surveillance drones showed the bullet impact and subsequent explosion from multiple angles, while GPS data precisely measured the distance between Sarah's firing position and the target. Meteorological records confirmed the challenging conditions under which the shot had been made. Adding to the significance of the achievement, military historians began placing Sarah's accomplishment in context with other legendary sniper shots. Throughout history, the previous record for longest confirmed kill had stood for over a decade, and Sarah had exceeded it by several hundred yards while operating under combat conditions that were far more challenging than those faced by previous record holders. The technical precision required for her shot was being analyzed by ballistics experts who struggled to explain how such accuracy was possible at extreme distance. Dr. Robert Martinez, a leading expert in military ballistics, published a detailed analysis of Sarah's shot that highlighted the extraordinary skill required for such an achievement. The mathematical precision necessary to place a bullet accurately at 2,137 yards is almost incomprehensible, he wrote. When you factor in the environmental conditions, the combat stress, and the single-shot requirement, what Sergeant Chun accomplished represents the pinnacle of human marksmanship capability. But perhaps more importantly, Sarah's achievement was opening doors for other women throughout the military. The success of the first female Army sniper created opportunities for qualified women to pursue roles that had been closed to them for decades. Applications from women interested in sniper training increased dramatically, and many who had previously been discouraged from pursuing combat specialties found new encouragement in Sarah's example. Captain Jennifer Walsh, who had commanded Sarah's unit during the record-breaking mission, reflected on the broader implications of what they had witnessed. Chun didn't just break a record, she observed. She shattered assumptions that had limited military effectiveness for generations. We now know that the most important attributes of an elite sniper, precision, patience, mental toughness, and decision-making under pressure, have nothing to do with gender. The tactical impact of Sarah's mission continued to unfold in the weeks and months that followed. The destruction of the enemy supply depot had eliminated weapons and ammunition that would have been used in attacks against coalition forces, potentially saving dozens of lives. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy operations throughout the region had been significantly disrupted, and several planned attacks had been canceled due to lack of supplies. But beyond the immediate military benefits, Sarah's achievement had created a psychological effect that intelligence analysts were still trying to quantify. Enemy forces were now aware that they could be engaged accurately at distances previously considered safe, forcing them to modify their tactics and limit their movements. The mere knowledge that such precision was possible at extreme ranges had altered the strategic calculation for insurgent operations. Sarah herself remained characteristically focused on her duties rather than the attention her achievement had generated. She continued to serve with her unit, conducting reconnaissance missions and providing precision fire support when needed. The record shot had not changed her approach to the job. She remained as meticulous in her preparation and as professional in her execution as she had been before becoming famous. The shot was important, but it was just one mission, Sarah reflected during a rare interview. My job is to support my unit and accomplish whatever mission we're given. The fact that I happen to be a woman who broke a record is less important than being a soldier who does her job effectively. The long-term implications of Sarah's achievement continued to evolve as military leaders grappled with what her success meant for force structure and personnel policies. The evidence was clear that gender-based restrictions on combat roles were eliminating potential talent that could enhance military effectiveness. Sarah's record demonstrated that the most important qualities for specialized military roles weren't correlated with traditional gender stereotypes. General Patricia Morrison, who had become the Army's highest-ranking female officer, used Sarah's achievement as a catalyst for broader changes in military policy. Sergeant Chun has proven definitively that performance matters more than preconceptions, she stated during congressional testimony. We can no longer afford to exclude qualified personnel from any role based on assumptions about their capabilities rather than evidence of their performance. The training protocols at sniper schools were modified to incorporate lessons learned from Sarah's techniques and approaches. Her methods for extreme long-range calculation, environmental assessment, and stress management became part of the standard curriculum taught to all sniper candidates. The knowledge she had developed through necessity became doctrine that improved the capabilities of military marksmen throughout the force. Years later, military analysts would identify Sarah's record-breaking shot as a turning point in the integration of women into combat roles. Her achievement provided undeniable evidence that talent and dedication could overcome institutional prejudice and traditional assumptions about human limitations. She had not just broken a distance record, she had broken barriers that had constrained military effectiveness for generations. The story of Sarah Chun, the woman who was told she wasn't sniper material, but went on to set the longest confirmed kill record in military history, became an inspiration for anyone who had been told their dreams were impossible. Her achievement demonstrated that extraordinary results could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances when determination met opportunity and talent was allowed to flourish without artificial constraints. Through precision, patience, and unshakable determination, Sarah had transformed herself from a small-town Montana ranch girl into a military legend whose achievement would inspire future generations of soldiers, regardless of gender, to pursue excellence without limits. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.